Imagine a situation where someone goes on stage of the Oscars and accept an award and then tell the audience, amongst many other things, but we'll start there, how terrible that is that Canadians and Mexicans and French can't vote in America and how it's a violation of their human basic rights and they're not living equally under the sun. You'd think they're mad because if you're not a citizen of a country, you're not supposed to be able to vote. You don't get the rights that citizens get in a country that you're not a citizen to. Now, that is if you are a loving, normal human being. You don't get to vote in a country you're not a resident of or a citizen of. But most especially if you have very nefarious, murderous intents towards the citizens of that country. Not only you're not a citizen, you also want to see all of the citizens of that country that you don't get to vote in, rightfully so and reasonably so because you're not a citizen there. You also want them all to be driven to the sea and get and be ridden of. You would think they're mad, right? You certainly wouldn't clap for them. Well, Yuval Avraham, who's an Israeli, who created the movie No Other Land with a Palestinian, said that how the Palestinians need to have equality and ability to vote like any other Israeli. No, they don't. Not because of racism or because of hatred, but because they've been demanding their, separation from the Jewish people and from Israel. They've been demanding their autonomy. They've been demanding to be on their own and not be quote allegedly occupied or controlled or just living under Israeli, administration and government. But they also want to vote in the to the country that they don't want to be a part of and they think should not even exist and that all its citizens should go back to Europe or driven to the sea or actually ethnically cleansed. So no, they do not have the right to vote because A, they don't want it, and then B, they complain to not having it because it's an opportunity to abuse the ignorance of the standard Westerner in order to mess with your mind if you're a Westerner watching this. But this is where you get to practice critical thinking. Why on earth should someone who's not a part of a country be called to be able to vote there and then act like a victim when they can't? When they don't even want that country to exist. It is so warped and so ironic as an understatement. It's delusional, it's bizarre, it's senseless to say the least. Now, it's one thing if that delusion and senseless way of thinking and expressing would come from the Palestinian, which also, of course, I forget his name, I don't care. But when it comes from the Israeli guy, Yuval, that is an example, one of many, to internalize anti Semitism. See, for millennia, the Jewish people have been persecuted by a consistent, shape shifting conspiracy theory that adapts itself to the time and the place. Whatever a population and a society hates most, they project it onto the Jew. The Jew is always the scapegoat of what a society hates most at that time in that place. In America, everybody's feeling ashamed and guilty for being colonizers or descendant of colonizers. So instead of dealing with their own guilt and their own shame, and maybe if they're really, really into it, then giving their own home back to an indigenous person, they demand the Jew on the other side of the planet to give their home to the Palestinian. Now, if the Jews were indeed colonizers, it would still be double standard and hypocrite. Except to make matters worse, the Jews are indigenous to Judea, which is Israel. The Israelites are indigenous to the kingdom of Israel, which is Judea. That is 3,000 years old and the birth origin of the Jewish people. Just like America is to the Native Americans, just like Australia is to the Aboriginals, just like New Zealand is to the Maoris, same thing. Israel, the kingdom of Israel, which is Israel of today, to the Jews. So do you see how warped that is? Now, it's one thing for it to be for that warp and warpment to come from a Palestinian who, the Palestinian society has been drowning in delusion and in the blood libel of delusion, hate, and greed. They have been so consistent and used to playing the victim in their own psychotic game of actually being the aggressor and then stealing the victimhood of their victim and then claiming to be the victim of that which they inflict, which they themselves inflict. They inflict ethnic cleansing. They call for ethnic cleansing. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is a slogan by Hamas. It means free of Jews. It doesn't mean the freedom that you know it as a standard Westerner. Freedom to live, freedom to prosper, all of that is great. And I love that that's your association with freedom. That's the association you should have with the word freedom. But not everybody think like you. And not all words don't mean the same thing everywhere in the world. There are millions of people in the world. To them, freedom means freedom of Jews. It is Nazism. You don't need to be German and wear an SS uniform and speak Deutsch and be blonde to be a Nazi. Nazism is an ideology. You can express that same ideology in Arabic wearing a jeans and a green headband, or in English having purple hair, waving flags of Hezbollah and other terror groups from the comfort of your own Ivy League that your parents are paying for when you know nothing about life. Nazism is Nazism. Any call for ethnic cleansing of Jewish people from their indigenous homeland or in general is Nazism, even if you don't actively put a Jew in a concentration camp. Nazism began 2 decades leading to the Holocaust, and it's the thing that created the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the cherry on top of 2 decades of brainwash and propaganda by the media, by college universities. Nazism spread throughout Germany and Europe in college universities, where you have images of German students segregating, preventing Jews from going on campus. The pro-Palestinian rallies against Israelis, against Jews, against Zionists, whatever, rose is a rose by any other name, right? We're the same people, are not like Woodstock or any sort of peace rally. That's crazy. If you wouldn't refer to a KKK rally as a peace rally, why would you do that with a pro-Palestinian rally that calls to the ethnic cleansing of Jews and is 99% abhorrent anti-Semitism by ignorant people that will tell you they're not anti-Semitic? No, they don't. They love Jews. They just hate the Zionists. 97% of Jews are Zionists. Or not Jews, just Israelis. Okay, 2/3 of the world of the world Jews are Israelis. 2/3. That's like saying you're not racist, you love black people, just not the ones in Africa. Any person with the slight of brain, with an ounce of brain, would see right through it and tell you that you're insane and that it's abhorrent racism. And you yourself wouldn't say it because you know. But when you're smart, but you become dumb with the Jews, that is literally a symptom of anti-Semitism, becoming suddenly stupid in manners that otherwise you have common sense. So to revert back to circle back to the Oscars and to No Other Land, created by a Palestinian and Israeli creators. It is a propagandist film that projects and echoes the blood libels, the lies. The Palestinian creator went on stage and said that it's important that Israel ends the quote ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. That is like saying that it's like a white person going on stage of the Oscars, accepting an award and saying that America needs to end the enslavement of white people by black people. And then having the audience cheer and having a black person next to you who did the movie with you kind of nod. You'd be like, this black person is maybe crazy or at the very least an Uncle Tom on steroids. And this audience, like, it's like we're back 200 years in time. It would be like an episode of Black Mirror. And yet when they do it to the Jew, an entire audience in the Oscars of so-called woke actors and industry members, they clap and cheer to that speech that says something so science fiction and so ridiculous. Ethnic cleansing is what the Palestinian culture and society have been enacting and attempting to enact consistently for nearly a century. As the Palestinians, because they've been the Palestinians for 60 years. They've started referring to themselves as the Palestinians in the 1960s. Before that, they were just the Arabs of the region. They only started calling themselves the Palestinians after Yasser Arafat told them to. It was as a counteract to the Jewish statehood and nationality and country, as a way of differentiating themselves from it. Many Arabs of the region decided to be a part of Israel, and they don't refer to themselves as Palestinians. They're simply Arab Israelis. But the ones who decided that they want to continue what Hitler started and finish it up, and not only differentiate themselves from the Jews, but finish them, ethnically cleansing them, they're the ones who went with the Palestinian movement of separating themselves and not accepting being a part of Israel. They segregated themselves from a place of anti-Semitism, from a place that wants to ethnically cleanse all Jews, quote, from the river to the sea, and have the entire Israel region to themselves. Ever heard the chant, "We don't want no two-state, we want all of it"? That's a Palestinian chant and a pro-Palestinian chant. There's no desire to a two-state. Every time you wonder why there's no two states, you're not supposed to address that question to Israel. You're supposed to address that question to the Palestinians, who constantly refuse it and don't want it. They want everything to be Arab, because the original slogan of "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," of Jews, is "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be Arab." That's the slogan in Arabic, created by Hamas, translated into free so that it could fit the Western ear. But you guys need to speak Middle Eastern to understand the Middle East. You guys need to step out of the way you think and understand the world, because not everywhere and everyone have had your education and your life experience. And understand the world the way you understand it, and understand the world in language of equality and peace. Bother reading the Quran before you speak about Islam. Let me quote to you one hadith, the words of Muhammad. It's written in the Quran, it's the words of Muhammad, one of his most famous prophecies. It says, and it's in Hamas charter. Charter, the thing that declares a group's or a leadership goal and purpose. "And the rocks and the trees will call, 'Muslim, O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him.'" Those are words, quote, from the Quran, from a hadith, from the beloved, peaceful Muhammad. If you understand where fundamentalism, Islamism comes from, none of this seems irrational or unreasonable, and you won't be having such a hard time grasping what I'm telling you and what we've been trying to tell you for years, especially since October 7th. If you understand that when we call it Nazism, we're not saying it as derogatory or as an exaggeration or for a dramatic effect. That's what Americans do with the word Nazi. It's a highly offensive appropriation, and it's unacceptable. Take it as our N word. When we say the word Nazi, we mean it. We understand what we're saying and why we're comparing it. We're not just saying it to insult a politician we don't like, which, by the way, is super cringe when you do that. When you understand that the Palestinian society is Nazi society, then it's not so hard for you to grasp what it is that we're trying to explain to you. And we wouldn't have to keep having this conversation again and again and again. And most importantly, you would not be clapping at these kind of abhorrent speeches that will be signed in the books of history. What that Palestinian creator of the movie No Other Country said about Israel, about alleged ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is what happened on October 7th, when 6,000 Palestinians, 2,000 of them civilians, 4,000 of them combatants of Hamas, infiltrated Israel from their independent autonomy, by the way, that they could have made a heaven out of. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Not a single Jew was there, except for 2 that were held captive by Hamas, that were just released in the hostage deal after more than 10 years. I'm not referring to the ones that were kidnapped on October 7th. 2 of them were held there for more than a decade for having entered Gaza by mistake. Those were the only 2 Jews there, because Jews are not allowed. That's ethnic cleansing, literally, by definition, happening in Gaza against Jews. And then on October 7th, they invade Israel and ethnically cleanse villages, dozens of villages, Jewish villages in the entirety of the south of Israel, butchering 1,200 civilians plus 300 soldiers. And by the way, IDF soldiers are 18 to 20-year-old, every Israeli who get drafted because we don't have a choice. We don't have the legitimacy, we don't have the privilege to choose between drafting to the military or going off to college. We don't have an ocean defending us from enemies. And we have real enemies on our borders and within that wants to finish up what Hitler started. That's what you don't get. You think the Holocaust ended in World War II. For you, in your sweet bubble, which I'm very happy for you. I want you to stay in that sweet bubble. I don't want you to know this reality. Just theoretically. Understand this reality just theoretically so that you don't condone anti-Semitism and that you condemn it when you see it, that you can recognize it. Israelis have had it. Right, there was no break between the Holocaust and now. The only reason why we're not exterminated is IDF soldiers, is the Israeli Defense Force. World War II, Nazism didn't end because the Allies bombed Europe. It was very helpful and thank you. But Nazism itself continued in Arabic in the Middle East, who collaborated with Hitler, with the European Nazism as it was happening. Hitler was meant to go to the Middle East and to the region of Israel and finish up the Jews of that region after he finishes up with the Jews of Europe. There were Jews in Europe, Jews in the Middle East, Jews in Africa. We were expelled all over the world in the 7th century, FYI, by Islam. So the Arab world at the time was already collaborating with Nazism. It's not that it started after Hitler because suddenly it just Hitler lost, the Nazis lost, the European Nazis lost. The Middle Eastern Nazis continued, and that's what Israel and Israelis have been dealing with on our borders and within 22 Islamic countries, most of which either under or aspiring for Sharia law and wanting to also take over Israel. Because the Middle East is a colonized, half of Asia got colonized by Islam in the 7th century and onward, now deeming it the Middle East. It was Buddhist, it was Hindu, it was pagan, it was Jew. Now it's Muslim. It got Islamized, it got Arabized. You know who they couldn't conquer again? They conquered Israel in the 7th century. But then we got it back. After the Ottoman Empire until the 1920s, and then World War I ended, the Ottoman Empire dispersed. And who got the region of Israel? The British Mandate. Deeming it the British Mandate of Palestine, Land of Israel. That was the full name prior to 1948. It was never a Palestinian country under a Palestinian autonomy. It was the name of a region, a colonial name given to it by a Roman emperor in the 2nd century that occupied Israel. And as an insult and to celebrate his successful occupation and invasion, named it Palestina. It's a word in Hebrew, plisha, that means invasion. The Palestinians of today literally named themselves after a word in Hebrew that means the invasion, invaders. That's how ironic this is. If you actually know history, you can't be fooled. And everything seems so, you understand why everything is so crazy and so warped. The reason you don't get it, the reason you don't see through the screen of delusion is because of ignorance. Educate yourself. This is the first step. This is your wake-up call. So the British Mandate got dispersed in 1948 after the Holocaust. There was still always Jewish presence in the land, whether it was under the Ottoman Empire or the British Mandate of Palestine, Land of Israel. That was the full name. All the coins, all the documentations will say Eretz Israel, Aleph Yud, Land of Israel, right next to Palestina. It was always Jewish, just under different occupiers. But the Palestinian narrative is a colonial narrative that risen as a counteract to Jewish liberation and freedom and indigenous autonomy. Israel is an indigenous miracle, by the way. Israel is what America would have been had the Native Americans won. People can't grasp it. They can't grasp the underdog winning. So you got to make us the bad dog instead of celebrating the victory and the overcoming. Like American society celebrates the victory and overcoming of Black people when they succeed in different industries, and that's a great thing. So we should. But the Jew doesn't get the same approach. No. Our victories are not, you know, an overcoming and a victory of survival and thrival. No. When we survive and thrive, we take over the world. It's because we're taking over the world and we're controlling, or we're now apparently we're colonizers, occupiers, supremacists, whatever. That's literally Hitler textbook. Oh, you're not saying it against the Jews, you're saying it against the Israelis. Sorry, the Zionists. Sorry, the Jews, who are the same people. A rose is a rose by any other name. Who are you fooling? Are you fooling yourself? Do you believe yourself? How are you to thrive in anything in your life if your brain is muddled by hate, greed, and delusion? That to do with the oldest hatred in history that you're still somehow not educated about. If you ask yourself what you would have done during the Holocaust, and you didn't get super uber upset over that despicable, weird speech, let me talk about Yuval Avraham as the pet Jew, as the tokenized Jew, as the, I'm not going to say Judenrat, not yet. That fringe minority of Jews that you use in order to excuse, it rhymed, spreading and echoing blood libels and lies and anti-Semitic propaganda by telling yourself it's not anti-Semitic. Look, look, pulling the card of the Jew that you have next to you. That is the mother, the grandmother of anti-Semitism. It is unacceptable. You wouldn't be using a Black Uncle Tom? Don't use a Jew pet. It's the same thing. How difficult would it be for you to apply everything you know about anti-Black racism on anti-Jew racism? Same principles. It's really not that complicated. Do you really want to maintain your brain as so fragmented and compartmentalized when you know so much about anti-Black racism, but you can't fathom how it's the same with the Jew? If you wouldn't do that to a Black person, don't do it to a Jewish person. It's very simple. And if you think it's not the same thing because the Jews ruled the world, that is your anti-Semitism, dude. No one at that Oscars should have clapped to that. It should not have won in the most sensitive time of persecution against Jewish people. And who wins? A tokenized pet Jew and a Palestinian. The pet Jew has internalized anti-Semitism because it has been, and we've had that every century. We have Jewish people who collaborate with our haters because they want to save themselves. When you're told a lie long enough, you start to believe it's like a child being abused by their parents, constantly being told that there's something wrong with them, and they grow up to believing it. And they just want to appease their parents, so they try to do better. That's what we're talking about when we say pet and tokenized Jews. It's Jewish people that believe, that have internalized the anti-Semitism, believe they actually are doing something wrong. Yuval Avraham believes that Israel is doing something wrong when it's factually underground lies and warped and have no context. It's bizarre. Why do you expect Palestinians to vote in Israel when they're not Israeli citizens? They don't want to be Israeli citizens. They try to kill Israeli citizens. What? You would not expect that of any other country if it was the same case. That's how deep the internalized self-hatred is, where you believe the blood libel and the falsities, and then you collaborate with your hater. And history is never kind to the Judenrat. Never. Not the Jewish tradition that writes about them. Every centuries we have stories about them. There were the Jews that wanted to stay in Egypt and remain slaves to the Pharaoh. And there were the Jews that worked with the Nazis. And there were the Jews that worked with the Romans and with the Greeks and with the Byzantines and now with the Palestinians, not in ways of improving life for everyone, but in ways of killing the body from inside. Allowing, it's like an immune system that turns on itself and allows the disastrous illness or disastrous bacteria to enter it and eat it up from the inside, kind of opens the gate and cooperates with it, and vetted it as alleged medicine when it's an enemy that wants to kill you. And then eventually they get killed as well. And their haters, they're not fond of them either. There is so many posts and writings across online by anti-Semitic, Islamist rats who write against Yuval Avraham, who is that Israeli who turns on his people with that movie. Now, it would be bad at any time, but now you're inflaming the winds of hate against us and excusing it. The things that they write about him are terrible. They still refer to him as a Zionist in a derogatory way, like in an insulting way. It's a beautiful term. Zion is Jerusalem. Zionism is the right of the Jewish people to live free and safe in their indigenous homeland. That's it. It's not against anybody. It's not about anybody. Zionism to Jewish people is the civil rights movement to black people. If someone was to tell you, oh, they love black people, they don't hate them, they're not racist, they just think that the civil rights movement is diabolic and that any black person who wants to be free and not enslaved is an evil person. Just them they don't like. Does that sound reasonable to you? That's how we look at you when you nod at that, or when you clap at that, or when you don't say anything, or when you don't blink at that. We look at you like it's terrifying. Honestly, it's terrifying to see you behave that way. So actors in the Oscars who clapped to that speech, pure anti Semitism and stupidity and ignorance. You have not changed at all. This world has not changed. People have not changed. The one thing that changed is the fact that the Jewish people have the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, they have a military, and they have a country. If we didn't have, that's the thing that prevents the Holocaust from finishing up itself, from the final solution to end, to succeed, allegedly. It's the IDF and the Israeli government that stopped Hamas and other Palestinians who invaded Israel on that day. They were planning on going through the entire country from the river to the sea. The river is the river of Jordan, east of Israel. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea, west of Israel. It's the borders from east to west. They were starting in the south where Gaza is. And they had enough ammunition on them and equipment to last for a good amount of few weeks at least. And it was in their plans. Documented and proven. The reason Israelis are alive and not all butchered is the IDF. Those are the real bodhisattvas of the world, because as soon as Israel would have been gone, the entire Middle East would be finally completely colonized and Islamized. And then where do you think they would stop there? Do you think Islamic nationalism would stop there? It has half of Asia. It has all of northern Africa. It's already embedded in Europe using European kindness against itself. It's already embedded in college universities in the US. You think it would stop there? If you don't get that this is not an exaggeration, that Israel is literally the dam between your life in the free world that you like to talk against, like as if Western society, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than every other society in history that has been very oppressive. Even the Far East, with all of its beauty and all of its wisdom and its martial arts and its Buddhism and its incredible spirituality, has been very oppressive. With the caste system, with the poverty. And that's good case scenario. Your Western society is what gives freedom to the world and to you. And Israelis, and IDF in specific, Israeli Defense Force, are quite literally, factually, the ones who are holding that tsunami of occupation, colonialism, literal, from taking over the US and Europe. If Israel falls, you think you're good? If your dream manifests, if the ideal of what you think it is happens, then it means you have to leave your home and give it to Mexicans and Native Americans. Okay. But that's the good case scenario, the delusional scenario. That's not really what's going to happen. You will have to evacuate your home for the caliphate. Or you could stay in your home if you were to pay a tax as a dhimmi. Unless you're willing to, of course, convert to Islam, and then you're fine, you're good, and then you want to be under a caliphate, and then that's your issue. If you're a man, you're happy. If you're a woman, not so much, especially if you're gay. 4 houses to the caliphate. I forget their names, but they're represented by 4 colors. Black, white, red, green. Sounds familiar? How many Arab nations have these colors on their flags? Why do so many Arab nations' flags, looks like the same flag? The Palestinian flag is the Jordanian flag minus the star. How come? They're all representative of Islamic nationalism, which is what the caliphate houses are. All of these nations have taken over a nation that wasn't Muslim or Arab, except for Saudi Arabia, which is where Arabs are from, originally, from the Arabian Peninsula. All other countries got Arabized and Islamized, and the colors to symbolize that colonialism, literal colonialism, where you come into another country and you make it your culture, that's colonialism. So when Islam comes into Europe and Islamizes it, that's colonialism. When Islam comes to the US and Islamizes it, that's colonialism. If your daughter, your white, cute, blonde daughter, starts wearing a keffiyeh and you're not paying attention and you think it's a phase, you're a fucking idiot and it's going to blow up in your face. Put your children in check. What's going on inside their brain? What's going on inside your brain? Do you want to wake up when it's too late? Start expressing gratitude to Israel and to IDF soldiers and Israelis at large. Stop enabling and clapping to anti-Semitism. Wake up. This is not just a Jewish fight. This is not just an Israeli fight. This is a real fight of the world. The same kind of fight we had in World War II, where the Allies prevented. Hitler was taking over Europe, was taking over Northern Africa. People don't talk about the Northern Africa part that he already arrived to. And he would have continued all over, and you would be living under the Third Reich if you would be living, because after he would finish up with all the Jews, he would go after gays and handicaps and Romanese. And brown and black. If you're white, straight, and blonde, maybe you'd still be alive today. Unless you resist them. That's what the Allies in World War II prevented. It was literally a matter of someone trying to take over the world, actively taking over the world, as he was accusing the Jews of taking over the world, ironically. And who's now trying to colonize the world after colonizing half of Asia and all of Northern Africa, while claiming that Israel is a colonialism, that the Jewish people have colonized it? Islamic Caliphate nationalism, Islamism, jihadism. This is not about a Muslim family living their life in peace and in harmony, just doing their best every day, that isn't Islamic nationalism and doesn't want to see Sharia law and is considered itself, I guess, moderate Muslim. I don't even know what that means. Or doesn't go to the fundamentalism of it. There is modern Islam, there's progressed Islam, the United Arab Emirates, right? They're doing good work. There is a beginning of a change, but still the great majority is living under Islamic delusion of trying to take over the world. And that is what Israel is now doing, trying to prevent the same thing that happened in World War II to happen now, except that instead of fighting European-speaking people, we're fighting Arabic-speaking people, and you guys don't get it. Why? Because they couldn't possibly do wrong, because they're brown. I can say that I'm brown. olive skin, whatever the fuck you want to put me in a box of. And that American delusion that is based on your history. Your history. White Europeans came to Africa and took black people to America and enslaved them. So it was a white on black enslavement, a white supremacy. Let me tell you something. Brown people came from the Middle East to Africa, taken black people to the Middle East and enslaved them. The brown Muslim world Arab world has enslaved so many black people. You don't talk about the enslavement of black people by the Middle East. Why don't you? Where's your head? Half a truth is a lie. Half a history is not knowing history at all. You're missing crucial point that will affect your life. European witches were burned and drowned and hanged and tortured by the 9 millions that we know of, probably a lot more. They were Europeans. The Jews who lived in Europe got exiled to Europe. They're not no Jew is originally from Europe or from the Middle East or from Africa. All Jews are from Judea, which is Israel. Judea and Samaria that is currently colonized by Palestinians under the colonial entity called the West Bank. Every time you hear West Bank, it's a colonial name to an indigenous place. It's called Judea and Samaria. It's where all Jews are originate from. The kingdom of Israel was bigger than the state of Israel today. It included the West Bank, certainly included Gaza, included parts of Egypt, parts of Lebanon, parts of Jordan. If we truly had aspirations to expand, we're not even expanding into our own original indigenous lines, let alone farther than that. That's how bizarre and stupid these accusations are. Stop projecting your guilt of your past, of your own history, onto the world. You're not helping. You really want to bring back indigenous land to them, to indigenous people? Get out of your house and give it to the people that belong there. Don't just issue an apology. It means nothing. You're issuing an apology for living on indigenous land, but demanding the Jews to leave their land. Again, I said it before, even if they were colonizers, it would still be hypocrite and bizarre of you. Start with yourself. They should do it, not me. I actually did it. They didn't actually do it, but they should do it. But they should give up their home. Maybe because you don't have self-awareness. You don't have awareness of the world. Have you considered that? Meditate. Meditate. Get some self-awareness so that you can have awareness of the world. So you are so lucky to have the people you speak against and talk shit against fight for you, for your freedom, for your future, for the future of your children, while you sit idly and clap to the dumbest, most vile type of speeches in the Oscars that will go down in history. You don't have to like Trump for everything, but currently he's the best, strongest, most potent antidote to something that is literally taking over the world. Well, Israel is, but Trump is not putting sticks in its wheels and is actually helping it. You have other issues with him? Vote in the next 4 years once this situation is resolved, once he clears everything out. There are many other things I think you should be appreciative of him for. But even if you don't like him at all, for anything, root for him at least for this one, because this is the most crucial thing in your life right now, whether you understand it or not. And God, I hope you start understanding it. It's one thing that us Israelis have to die in the name of this battle that isn't just ours, it's of the free world, literally. But to have you spit at us and argue with us and judge us and criticize us and call us the bad guy, fuck you. If you sit in your social gatherings and you evoke the memory of the Holocaust to look like you care about Jews, but you're not talking about the actual genocide that the Palestinians are trying to enact against Israelis, that Hamas is enacting against Israelis, that has done on October 7th, it was a genocide. In case you don't know what the word genocide means, it's trying to erase a genome. And it's a word that was created after the Holocaust to describe the Holocaust. There was no word to define that. You don't get to appropriate the greatest horror, historic horror that ever happened to humanity against the Jewish people to spread more blood libel against the Jewish people and to victim blame and to make us look like the bad guy when we're once again fighting the same situation. That is anti-Semitic in and of itself. And if you speak about the Holocaust and you don't speak about the genocide that they're trying to enact against us today still, you don't get to speak for us. You don't get to speak about us. You don't get to use us to virtue signal while having zero virtue. Virtue is a verb. Virtue signaling is crap, and we see right through it. It's narcissistic. It's eerie. People are waking up. They're not stupid, especially not Jews. And to the American Jew, the Western Jew that isn't living in Israel, you don't consider yourself Israelis, but you're Jewish, and you don't speak up. What are you waiting for? Are you comfortable with us Israelis speaking up for you, fighting for you, giving our flesh, blood, bones, societal acceptance, convenience, peace of mind for you? Hi, you lazy motherfucker. You know how selfish you are? Do you know how it hurts to see you quiet? Speak up. Your silence is the reason why people's minds are so embedded in anti-Semitism, brewing in anti-Semitism, because you never counter it. You let it fester and spread and grow. How dare you? Us Israelis, we came to the US in shock to see what happened here in the past decades. We were in the front line over in Israel, every single one of us serving in the IDF, fighting physically terrorism. I didn't sleep for 2 years in my service. Literally and partaking in the life savings of hundreds of Israelis on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis. I served during the second Intifada, which by the way, means the violent uprising against Jewish people and the murder of them. Okay, the first Intifada, I couldn't take the school bus to school. I had to walk to school because Palestinian suicide bombers, and this was in the 90s, in the early 90s, Palestinian suicide bombers would go up on school buses and blow themselves up to kill as many children, Jewish children, as possible, because then you'll have a lot more virgins up in heaven. That is literally was the belief system. That's an Intifada. School buses blowing up and children's organs flying all over. Cafes blowing up and people's organs flying all over. Nightclubs, street fairs, music festivals. When they say there's only one solution, globalize the Intifada, the solution refers to the final solution of the Holocaust, and the Intifada refers to the modern day Holocaust, attempts of Holocaust. What the fuck is wrong with you that you're walking next to them as they chant and not say anything? Or if you walk next to them and say, oh, I'm not a part of it, I'm just walking. Oh, would you walk in a rally, in a KKK rally where they call to enslave blacks? Would you show your face next to them? Would you be their friend on Facebook? No? Oh, but with the Jews, it's okay. Different standards, different way of analyzing it. No, there's no different way of analyzing it. But there is a way of analyzing you when you do that. So back to the Jew. We were in the front lines in Israel, fighting that real, active, daily fucking Nazism with our flesh torn. You were here, in the West, in America, in Europe, wherever the fuck you made your fortune or freedom and lived in the bubble of delusion, the bubble of illusion and delusion of safety. Well, we were responsible for your safety. What did you do? Did you speak up in your anti-Zionist circles? Did you call out anti-Semitism? Did you educate? Did you make sure you know what's going on in Israel and the history of Israel so people can't use you? Or did you let them turn you into the pet Jew? It's okay, my Jew friend here. They're fine with what I'm saying, so you're a part of it. You're a part of the responsibility. The insanity that we're seeing right now. 20 years. I didn't go to college here. Did you? Did you know that they have professors who are abhorrent Islamic anti-Semite fucks or abhorrent communist anti-Semite fucks? Yeah, the Soviet Union created the Elders of Zion, which served as the inspiration to the book of Hitler, Mein Kampf. Hitler was obsessed with the Elders of Zion. And based on that, he wrote Mein Kampf. That was the Soviet Union who manufactured that, and pogroms and other massacres of Jews. Yes, so the first communist was a Jew. Okay, well, it turned on itself. Because if the Jew is considered a imperialist colonial supremacist, because that's the modern day anti-Semitism, so any communist who always hates imperialism and even capitalism, they will naturally hate the Jew because the Jew is associated with that. So you see the communist professors and you see the Islamic professors brainwashing American youth. Maybe you sat next to them in your class. Maybe you yourself are a professor and you saw fellow professors do that. Did you say something? Did you complain? Did you fight? Did you stop it? Did you do anything? You didn't? Now's the time. I don't want to hear about it. Now's the time. I don't care how you do it. In your stop being a friend of someone who's an anti-Zionist or hates on Israel or thinks that Israel needs to be dismantled, but they love you. As long as you don't have a military and a government to defend you in time of need. Who came and saved the Israelis in Holland, in Amsterdam, that were lynched by an Islamic mob after a sports game? An entire night of lynching. And the local police force didn't do shit. Israel sent airplanes to save them, to evacuate them. You can live outside of Israel, my friend. You cannot not live without an Israel. Every time we live without an Israel, without the existence of Israel, we don't live. We get butchered by the millions. We get persecuted. We get exiled. We get ghettoed. We get forced into Christianity or Islam. We get beheaded. We get whatnot. We get dhimmied. Start acting like you understand that. And if you don't understand that, start understanding that. Stop believing people who tell you about Israel bad stuff just because you haven't been there enough or you don't truly know yourself. Talk to your Israeli friends. Talk to your Jewish friends who are knowledgeable. Get the information. Educate yourself. And don't just educate yourself. Speak up. And if you're a celebrity, if you're a Jewish celebrity, if you have a voice, if you have a microphone, if you're a content creator, an influencer, a famous actor, whatever, if you're not speaking up, I have a beef with you, a personal beef with you. Because you're a part of the problem. You do not have the legitimacy or the privilege to be quiet and bow your head. It has never worked. In every century when we were persecuted, when the Jews who chose to bow their head got beheaded. It doesn't work for us to bow our head. It only works for us when we rise up and fight. When you're a knee-trembling Jew that goes on the train because you want to please your environment, you die. You get gassed. You don't want to get gassed? Start fighting. There are different ways of fighting. You don't have to physically be a warrior. You don't have to be drafted to the IDF. You can fight with your words. You can fight with your influence. You can fight with your knowledge, with your social media. Share other prominent voices. Speak up yourself. Whatever you can is something. It echoes. It influences. When your circles see that they can't use you, that you don't agree with them, people start changing. And let me tell you about people around you, especially older generations. They swore to never again. This was not an oath of the Jew. It was an oath of the world. And those same people who swore to never again after the Holocaust are not doing shit now. Never again happened again on October 7th. And they still treat it like it's a controversial political issue. Oh, we don't want to talk about it here because it's political. The blood of our people and the spilled blood of our people is no one's goddamn politics. And you need to tell them that. And you don't want to tell them that directly, keep bringing it up. We always get gaslit out of talking about anti-Semitism with it's political. Well, guess what? Every anti-Semitic persecution is always political. Hamas were elected government of the Palestinians. The Nazis, the National Socialists, Hitler, were elected by the Germans. The Roman Empire that conquered Israel in the 2nd century and named it Palestina after its successful invasion. That's an imperialism leadership. It's always political. Our slaughter is always political. You can't talk about anti-Semitism and persecution of Jews without talking politics. And a big aspect of anti-Semitism, by the way, is gaslighting us with it's political. And you need to understand that. And when someone tells you that, you need to tell them that. I know it's scary. I know it's hurtful. I know it's tough. But you can't stop just because, well, it's political. Do not keep quiet. And I don't care how old they are. And I don't care about their status. And I don't care how nice they are and how much they do for someone else. When they gaslight you out of talking about anti-Semitism with it's political, they just did something anti-Semitic to your face. That's hurtful. That's wrong. And it's not okay. And if anything, the better they are as a person in general, the more hurtful that is, because you'd expect more. Especially if every now and then they like to evoke the memory of the Holocaust in ways of like showing that they care about what's going on with Jews. They care about showing what's going on with Jews when it's easy, when it's status quo. Everybody knows the Holocaust was bad. Well, almost, except for Kanye. Standing up for Jewish people when we're persecuted is always controversial. It's always political. It's always divided. It's always uncomfortable. Anyone who doesn't do it for us would not speak up in the Holocaust. So if you're watching this and you're not a Jew, and if you ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust, during the rise of the Third Reich, in the time leading to the Holocaust, and then in the Holocaust itself, if you're not saying anything about what's going on right now, if you're not standing up for your Israeli friends, for all the Jews, if you're playing this divide game, if you're playing the bothism game, as if there's two sides to this coin, not everything is a coin. Is there two sides to slave owners and slaves? No, you wouldn't dare say that, especially not when there's a black person in the room. But when there's a Jew in the room, you can say that there's two sides to each fucking coin. It's not a coin. Our blood is not your fucking coin. Not in reality, not in metaphor, not your coin. We're not a coin. The Palestinians would have had their own autonomy and their own country a long time ago if they just let go of their desire to ethnically cleanse the Jews. Funny enough that Palestinian piece of shit of creator of no other land says that needs to, that the ethnic the so-called ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians needs to end. Disgusting. Unacceptable. 2 million Germans died in World War II when the Allies were bombing Nazi Germany. Terrible. Many of them were probably innocent. Was that a genocide? Was that an ethnic cleansing of Germans? Or was that a direct result of their terrible, horrid actions? What the Palestinians are going through is a terrible result of their terrible, horrid actions. Call it as it is. Now, not in retrospect, not 50 years from now, not a century from now. Now, when it's uncomfortable, when it's challenging, when your friends don't get it. If you'll start calling it out, then your friends will start getting it. In the fucking present. You wouldn't do it in the present now. You would not have done it in the present then. And every time we're persecuted, it's never anti-Semitic. A German Jew took Hitler to court, sued him before the Holocaust, saying that his behavior and actions and propaganda are anti-Semitic. Hitler said, "Oh, I'm not anti-Semitic," and then he evoked the type of anti-Semitism from the medievals, right? I'm not hating on Jews because they're Jews or because of those reasons that they had in the medievals. No, it's because of what they do now in Germany, A, B, C, D. That's what I'm fighting. Never mind that was also blood libel and lies and not true and falsities. But he said it's not because they're Jewish, it's because of what they do that they're not actually doing. So he got exempt, acquitted. He won the case. Every anti-Semite in every generation says, no, it's not because they're Jewish, it's because of what they're doing. Anti-Semitism is what they did the last century. Those were anti-Semitic reasons. So now the standard anti-Semite would be like, oh, the last century Hitler did it because of this and that, but that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this because of Israel and Zionism that are doing X, Y, Z. No, we're not. Okay, so you see us actively going into Gaza and fighting. Yeah, but why? What's the context? Are we going there because we want to so-called allegedly ethnically cleanse them? How do you ethnically cleanse, by the way, someone who isn't an ethnicity? The Palestinian is not an ethnicity. Is it a nationality, a baby nationality that started in the 1960s? Their ethnicity is Arab. 20% of Israelis are Arab. If it was about ethnic cleansing, then why are there Arabs in Israel that are fine and free and even serving in the IDF? So we want to ethnically cleanse Arabs, but we have Arabs in the IDF serving? That's interesting. Are we really that stupid? We can't do it properly? Maybe we're going in for other reasons. And maybe the so-called victim who's actually the aggressor is now experiencing the consequences of their Nazi-like actions and ideology. Maybe they're gaslighting you and acting like the victim when they're not. How surprising for a narcissist and a psychopath to pretend to be the victim when they're not, when they're the abuser. How shocking. That's just not possible. That never happens. No, you don't know it yourself because someone must have done that to you at one point. Maybe you are one yourself. That's why you so resonate with the Palestinian narrative because you yourself are an aggressor that pretends to be a victim. Are you playing the victim for your entire life? Have you been playing the victim while hurting people? Are you a narcissist? Because that is because like attracts like. Consider that maybe you're resonating with the Palestinian narrative because it's your narrative. You like to flip table. You like to hurt other people and then gaslight them as if you're the victim. Am Israel Chai. Wake up, world.